All right, we're going to go ahead and start recording. Hello, everybody. My name is Eddie Chavez Calderon. I am the campaign organizer for Arizona Jews for Justice. And here today, we are excited to bring you a great programming and part of what we've been working on Arizona Jews for Justice project. This is a new ground that we have been stepping in, but of course, it goes side to side with our mission of helping the most vulnerable folks in our community. In this case, we're talking about our unsheltered community and our displaced community. And we're using that very vocabulary because we know that folks aren't necessarily homeless, they're unsheltered. Because home is a construct that will be created, and home is a construct that, because of our capitalistic societies, most folks have had to have been disappropriately pushed out into the streets. And this is where it comes into our work. And luckily, we have these three amazing community leaders who are just so beautiful in their efforts of advocacy, from direct acts of help to advocating and policy and what that looks like. So not trying to spend any more time dilly-dallying here, I want to introduce some amazing people. First of all, I want to introduce one of my great mentors and a great personal friend of mine, Barbara Lewkowitz, who has worked for organizations like CAS and countless other organizations, who has personally fed hundreds and hundreds of asylum seekers, from Israeli salad to pasta to pizza to having an amazing time watching asylum seeking children eat some amazing watermelon. Barbara Lewkowitz has been a great person who has just been a beautiful advocate to helping out the most vulnerable. Next, my great friend and mentor, Austin Davis, who shows us what it's like to have a little bit more compassion every single day. I like to tell people that Austin Davis is what I like to call a living radical act of kindness, where he always looks at how can I be even more kinder without even thinking about it. I think that's where we need to start our own revolutionary on who we are. And last but not least, our great friend, Dr. Neal Lester, coming at us from the School of Humanities in ASU, who we're so happy to partner up with this, and has been such an amazing blessing and a partner in addition to helping our movement out and helping us with over hundreds and hundreds of reusable water bottles, which we have seen that dramatically change the way people feel, dramatically change the way folks have access to water. We have seen that we have hit triple digits here in Arizona. So we're going to be asking you a series of questions to our three panelists, and please answer in all truthfulness and in your respectable opinions and how we're doing this. So well, our first question is, we've seen triple digits happen in Arizona. We've seen that folks have to have, especially now speaking about the zone, why is it that our government still has not stepped up to even provide shelter? And I'm gonna go ahead and start by asking Dr. Neal, from your years of experience, what have you seen? Like, why has our government still failed to even provide a simple shelter on top of folks' head?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I have not dealt specifically with the policy angle of this so much as being one of the recipients of policies that were created to further criminalize those who are experiencing housing insecurity. What I have noticed is that I don't know that we can separate the government from the people, and in which this is about a deficit in empathy and a deficit in humanity. Policy follows the thinking of those who are in charge and have the power to make those decisions. So I would extend this beyond the government. I totally understand what policy means, but policy has to go hand in hand with how, people are here. And that's the part that's hardest. What I have seen in the years that we've been doing this for 5 years, more or less, is a willingness of community folks to come together to feel like we can counter some of those things that aren't happening in terms of policy. And let me just extend one of the comments that you said. Yeah, we provide water bottles. We provide some of those things that the campus, the Human Services campus provides. What's missing from that equation, though, is the humanity component. And that's what I think that we are providing. And I see some of our supporters there, Jackie Rifkin and Austin's been down. That's what we're trying to show people is we may not be able to put you in a house, but what we can do is offer you every other week and every week some human kindness. And that doesn't cost us anything except a little bit of giving of ourselves. So in terms of policy, I think what we've seen in the 5 years is that now we can no longer be on the streets. People cannot give out food. People cannot do those things that we were doing 5 years ago because the city has criminalized not only those who are experiencing this, but those who are trying to support by way of humanity. So I hope that addresses some part of what you asked, because we're not there. There are lots of people traveling different lanes. This is a multi-lane highway. We're just one lane on that highway.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Of course. And I love that you said bringing back the humanity, because I believe one of our missions being a Jewish led organization is to bring back the dignity in human beings. And which is what I love when Austin talks about the stories, and when myself was out there with Austin, it's providing that dignity to people of not just giving something, but saying, hey, how are you? How are you doing? Reminding folks that folks are human beings, right? That all of us have that thing inside of us that beats and that allows us to feel. So we must be reminded of that. So I love that.
And let me just add that I'm not either oring this, because I recognize that, you know, that one individual conversation is not going to disrupt the system. We're having those conversations now about anti-racism, which is not just about the color of one's skin, but it's about what you have and don't have, how old you are, all of those kinds of things, ageism, classism, sexism, homophobia, all those things. But I will say that these are not necessarily mutually exclusive, that there are ways in which if we can sort of get to people's hearts, but recognize I can't see your heart. What I can see is what you're doing. And what we're trying to do is to say, we see you. We are here as your personal shoppers for this 2 hours every other Saturday morning, and we are here to listen to your story. And the stories have been so gratifying for us that we can't wait to get back down to sort of talk to our community again. These are our clients. We are not out helping anybody. We are clients, and we are personal shoppers, and we are trying to look at citizens as human beings and not as a condition or circumstance.
I love that. Thank you. So now looking at this from an organizational point of view, and my next question is for Barbara. Barbara, how have you seen things shift and kind of systems shift throughout your plenty of years of experience from being a boots on the ground volunteer to running organizations that provide immediate aid for folks?
Right. So I've actually been involved in affordable housing or some sort of housing since 1998. So I can tell you, speaking from a policy standpoint, there's lots of different reasons, but I think there's three main reasons why there isn't enough shelter. And that's because there's a lag in assessing the number of people who need shelter and the reasons why they need shelter. So one example may be that there's a 25% increase every single year for the past 4 years of the number of people who are unsheltered. And so a second reason may be that we can't build the affordable housing fast enough, right? There's the expense of the construction, there's the expense of permitting, there are people who speak out against having even smaller shelters. It's called Not in My Backyard, NIMBY. And so even separate cities don't want to have shelters built in their own cities. They just want to kind of keep it in downtown Phoenix. And then there's what I would call, and some people are going to disagree with me, there's the Insidious point in time survey, which is exactly what it is. It's just a point in time survey, which just tells you on a particular night between certain hours, exactly how many people on our street. And it extrapolates that to tell us how much money our city or Maricopa County or our state are going to get in funding to help the homeless. And if that particular night is either rainy or cold, or there's a place to stay on that night, we're not going to get an accurate count, and therefore we're not going to get an accurate amount of federal funding or, flowing into our city or our counties or our states in order to build that affordable housing. So that's kind of the public policy wonky part of it. There's just a critical shortage of shelter beds in Maricopa County. Always have been. Still in 2020, is a critical shortage of shelter beds. And the number of people who are using those shelter beds is increasing in age also. So the number of people over 55 that are using shelters in Maricopa County alone increased by 60%. So the homeless population is now even aging, and that makes it more difficult for them. So those are some of the policy reasons. Are we going to be able to reverse that and get on top of it? It really depends on kind of the state and congressional levels and the people we elect at those levels, I believe. So I know that the city of Phoenix will make some decisions about adding a couple of more 100 beds to downtown. But I think that the answer really is to have smaller distributed shelters, and also to have more what I would call drop-in oasis type of locations around the whole valley.
Love that. Thank you so much, Barbara. And now my next question goes to Austin. Being on the ground, and Austin's truly been an amazing point and way of being able to provide folks with just some immediate aid. Austin, we pretty much started this before the pandemic really ramped up. How have you seen the evolution happen? How have folks been affected from the point of where everybody's like, well, should I maybe wear a mask? Should I not wear a mask? And we saw that due to lack of access, right? Our unsheltered community didn't really know what was going on. And this is why one of our missions was to provide even just a simple mask to our community. What have you seen as the evolution from the beginning of the year when we started going out to where we are now?
Definitely, yeah. So, when we started this project, it was end of March, early April. And when we first started going out there and giving out these masks, a lot of people didn't know why it was so important to wear the mask, and they weren't really educated on what was going on. So a lot of what I was doing in early April, I would say, was having these conversations with people. So we just kind of be talking about, the risks and what's kind of going on. And what I've seen now, actually, it's very inspiring for me because, looking back at now compared to April, there are so many people out there who are wearing these masks. And people actually come up to me and ask me for another mask. Some people have came up and said, hey, I've dropped this mask, or, it's dirty, could I get a replacement? And it's just very inspiring to see how many people are actually taking it so seriously, and they're looking out for each other in the unsheltered community.
Thank you for that. Next, this is for Dr. Lester. We were doing some research, and we were seeing that your project with an involving ASU students is honestly very unique. We're seeing that a lot of other universities weren't having the same type of programming with the efforts of bringing in a powerful presence of students. Why did you decide that it was important to bring youth in and getting them involved in helping out our unsheltered community?
Okay. Thank you for that. About Project Humanities, which I founded about 10 years ago in a situation similar to this economically, when folks were saying, well, why would anybody major in humanities? You can't make any money in that. And so I served on the central administration at the time and was given the charge of how do you make humanities more robust. And so rather than sort of trying to start talking about disciplines and all that stuff that folks inside the academy talked about, I sort of boiled this down to, are we losing our humanity? So this became a conversation not about what you majored in or whether you went to school, but how are we human? Not even that question of what does it mean to be human? Because I don't know what it means not to be human. What I know is how am I humane? And so we came up with this thing we call Humanity 101. And Humanity 101 is not a course, but a series programs and strategies. This, of course, our outreach is one of those, where we try to focus on compassion, empathy, forgiveness, integrity, kindness, respect, and self-reflection. So we have these programs inside ASU around the Valley on dispelling the myth, homelessness, or we'd have people who are creative writers and experiencing homelessness come in, and they would talk about their lives before this circumstance. And I recognized that this couldn't just be an intellectual exercise, that we had to do what we call Humanity 101 in action. So we started off as a spontaneous day, and we did not give out food. This became, clothing, shoes, and toiletries. And what grew as a small number of, 4 or 5 people, Jackie Rifkin's on the line here. We had things on tarp, and I just invited people to come out on a Saturday morning and do it. And trust me, that in and of itself was a challenge, because we were doing it at 6:30 a.m. in the morning till 8:30 every other Saturday. And, I'd hear grumbling like, oh, it's so early. And then we started looking at strategies that people could use in terms of collecting items that we would then take down. And we set up a little market so that people came in and they would shop, and we were their personal shoppers. And I cannot tell you how the volunteers, all the way from Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts up to retirees, students, faculty, administrators, visiting faculty from Pakistan, for example, visiting faculty from China, all came in because this was something that connected them to something that you wouldn't ordinarily experience, which is shared humanity across boundaries. And the students, I learned that, we changed the language of how we talk about our clients. We were not going down helping people. We had one student talking about, why are those bombs on the street? We're like, we're not referring to people as bombs. So there was this education process that was important to me to supplement the kinds of things that you might talk about in a classroom or in a workshop. And the ways in which clarify, I don't think that we're the only people at ASU doing outreach. What I do know is that we are one of the only organizations trying to do this consistently. So we are not just doing it around the holiday season. We are doing this.
Good point. Good point.
That's what we've tried to do. We have tried, and we've added a Friday component so that we do our sorting on Fridays so that we can take it down every other Saturday. And again, Human Services Campus give out those items. We've had that told to us multiple times. Missing from that, though, is this one-on-one human compassion and empathy. And what can I do for you today? And I can tell you, when somebody cries because we've been kind to them, that moves this whole conversation to a whole new level for me personally, and for the students who have gone down.
Thank you.
So Eddie, can I interject something?
Yes, go for it.
So first of all, Dr. Lester, thank you so much, because in the 4 to 5 years that you've been doing Project Humanities, I think that the difference in how people treat those who are experiencing homelessness, especially near the ASU downtown campus, has been tremendously changed. And so that in itself is something that helps people stay housed. And people who are sleeping on the street, there's a reason why they're sleeping on the street, right? They might have a distrust of people in general. The crowds at the shelters or the clinics scare them. They're more likely to sleep on the streets, and actually they're prone to victimization when they sleep on the streets. But if they feel they have a friend, like Dr. Lester, like his students, like the people who are involved, like Austin, who comes and visits us on a regular basis, that consistency is what really keeps them going. And then it's a matter also of design. If people have to go to a place and it's too difficult, they have to stand in line, there isn't a person to interact with them one-on-one, they're gonna avoid becoming involved or engaging with the visitors. There were times when I was working downtown and I actually saw people coming downtown with sack lunches and throwing them over a fence.
Right.
So the people who were experiencing homelessness and maybe sleeping on the street were like puppies,
right,
to them. They were throwing sandwiches over. And so I think when we think about that, Eddie, the reason why I wanted to interject is because it's all about the consistency of that human interaction, which is really going to make somebody successful in maybe thinking about wanting housing and staying in their housing.
Well, and we've also taken it upon ourselves to have programming through Project Humanities with other organizations who are offering support. So if we can't, for example, do something, there's another organization in Chandler called Fans Across America, or there's the Aris Foundation in Tempe, or there's First Church, UCC, where we have program and there's extra food from the catering, which we don't want to throw away. We make sure that somebody else gets it so that they can benefit from stuff that's already been paid for. So there are all kinds of strategies that we're looking so that we're not the ones, and I used to minimize this saying, well, we're not giving anybody a job. And I keep saying, we have to stop minimizing that, because sometimes all it takes is someone being kind to us that can totally change, not necessarily our circumstance, but certainly our response to a circumstance. And I tell you, I've become like a scratch record when I talk about homelessness is not an identity, it is a circumstance. And if there's anything that reminds us of that, it's looking at what's happening in California now, where people are essentially unsheltered and homeless through no design of their own. And once people have sort of stepped in that world to say, and yes, we've had some moments where actually the threat was not with our clients, it was with police coming down who were to disrupt us and threaten to arrest us and give us tickets for being there. So that's why I opened the conversation up in terms of policy. That has come from our local city that doesn't want us there. And I can count the number of times where I thought I might be one of those statistics because I tried to explain what we were doing. And the more I explained, the more agitated this police officer became. So this is bigger than that circumstance. And trust me, I understand the position of those who are there. I go and do my stuff and then I go back. But what I remind people is that trash and all these other things that they associate with that circumstance is not about the identity of the person. I live in a place where I can walk around my neighborhood and I see trash and I see dog feces and stuff that is not picked up. I used to go to the theater before COVID and people left trash behind. So that is not inherently because of that circumstance. Get more trash receptacles out there. So this is about humanity, not about, if people just pull themselves up by their bootstraps. There is a network that is missing there. And there are all kinds of circumstances that lead to this. And that's the education that takes place, not in a classroom necessarily, but in this space of interacting with folks.
Thank you. I love that. That was truly incredible. And it's something that we've seen, right, with how brittle and broken our capitalistic system is. And one of the things that I think I always have conversations with Austin is that a lot of folks are in situations that any single one of us could be in.
Yes.
Right? This isn't something that is untouchable. That this isn't something that is so far-fetched that it couldn't happen to us. And we see how many folks lost their jobs within weeks, right? And how many folks were overwhelmed by the bills, by everything that was just piling up. So my next question is to all three of you. How have you adapted to the policies that have kind of pushed back, that have stopped folks from being able to help other folks? And this is a question for all three of you, because all three of you have had the same amount of efforts in trying to advocate for people.
Wow, that's a really good question. I guess for me, I push back by directly trying to contact the people I know who may have an impact. And so that might be speaking one-on-one with a council person or with the chief of police or with somebody in the Phoenix Housing Department and trying to help them better understand what the situation is that they're creating. That, for example, if you go down into the zone and you're setting up barriers for people to be safe, it just means that they're going to go somewhere else and not be safe there because there's less resources. And so I guess the way that I'm adapting is to keep pushing and trying to educate people not just the people who are my peers and the people who work in housing, but the people who may not understand it. You know, to talk to the chief of staff of one of the council members and say, let's really talk about what the homeless issue is within your council district. And having them begin to get the idea and the realization of what they can do and the decisions and policies that they need to support in order to change it.
Austin, did you want to go next?
Yeah, for sure, definitely. You know, one thing that I think has definitely changed as I've done this work more is I really try to, you know, have these conversations one-on-one with people when I go down there and ask them what they individually need. You know? So one thing that I've added, I guess, to our program is I do a lot of voice memos on my phone. So I'll be talking to someone and they'll say, hey, I need this, and I'll just make a voice memo of that. And I think that's been really impactful because not only, you know, I've gotten to really get to know these people. You know, there's this woman named Ellie down in the zone, and her foot was actually run over by a car a couple weeks ago. So, and she doesn't even have a tent. She has kind of a tarp that's put up in a shady spot. So she can't even really get out of her tent. So this is just an example, but you know, every time I go down there, I ask her what kind of medicine she needs, and then the next week I bring her that medicine. But one other thing I wanted to say, going back to what you were saying, Dr. Lester, about how you know, homelessness it's not an identity, it's a circumstance. One of the most impactful moments for me personally was I was actually at a Tempe park, and I just knew there was a small community there. So I was going to service them. And I met this homeless couple who, you know, they were just sitting on a little grassy hill, and I went over and gave them some food, and we started talking, and they started talking to me about how they were, I think their exact words were, they were new to this homelessness thing. And they said they'd never been homeless before. They'd been living comfortably all their lives, and they just got kicked out. And this was, I think they said it was like their first week or two of being on the streets. And I ended up talking with them for about 45 minutes, and that was a really emotional moment for me. I just remember, you know, leaving and crying a little bit. And I don't know, it's moments like those where it really shows me how important it is to continue doing this work and to just, you know, try to do the best we can.
Well, you know, in my arena, there's not a single thing. In fact, one of the hardest things that this pandemic has done that I've gone through is the fact that we've had to put this work on hiatus. That's hard. But I also know that it is not good for us to go up and set up the way we have done and then jeopardize, compromise the health of our volunteers and those that we're trying to support. So what we have tried to do is to partner with Jews for Justice and Fans Across America so that we could get some items out. But there's a team of folks out there who are just ready to do stuff. So we've come up with new strategies in the same way that we talk about this crisis is another opportunity, is we're gonna create an Amazon wish list. And I understand the contentiousness about Amazon, but we live in a world where we have to look at the best and the worst at the same time. Mm-hmm. Get that. So please, you know, I understand that. But I also know that we can do some good work. We live in a society where, yes, in fact, with all these people that have so much that we can't even imagine what that much is really like. I don't even know if I could write that down. That could solve this problem. And so part of my frustration in this is that it feels like we are doing Band-Aids rather than trying to, instead of begging for things, but also acknowledge the fact that people aren't going to do it. And so in the absence of people not disrupting this capitalist society, what are we going to do until this happens? And so that puts us in a place where we can say, okay, here's what you can do. So we started to post on our Facebook page, here are city council meetings that you can go to. Here are the people you can write to about this. We also post educational pieces and infographics so that we see this in the larger context of what is happening regionally, but also what's happening nationally. So there's data that we can look at to see this is not unique to the Phoenix metro area. So I don't think there's one thing that we've done. I think we're trying to do multiple things to try to address something that is big and ugly and is not going to go away just because we wish it away. But in the absence of a single strategy, then we have to do multiple things. And I've been gratified to see that people who support us have been sending, here's what we're going to do when we get back. We're going to set it up this way. And here's what we're going to do. And those partnerships are incredible. So I think we have to look at partnerships and collaborations and look at what we can do rather than focusing on those things that we can't.
Yeah, I love all three of those answers, and they just make me feel so happy to be able to continue the work. And part of that is through collaboration with each other. I think that's one of the most crucial aspects, right? I think when we were helping out asylum seekers, I don't think we could have helped over 40,000 people if it wasn't for collaborations within the community. That's what it takes. So moving forward, go ahead, Barbara.
I think one of the things we have to add to that is that not only do we need to have the collaboration, but we have to do a lot of planning for what we think might be coming. And the reason why I say that is not to be a downer, but to realize that there's going to be limited job opportunities and employability for lots of different kinds of people, not just people who are at a lower level of income that we might be used to. And we need to prepare ourselves that the problem of people experiencing homelessness and the fact that there's less affordable housing and that it's more expensive to find housing now in Maricopa County is going to lead to an increase of the people that we're going to be serving. And so those sort of disabling conditions are things that we have to think about and prepare for from a public policy standpoint and a planning standpoint, not just that, we can go out there and help an increasing number of people, but what are some of the steps that we're going to take so that maybe we don't have those increasing numbers of people.
I love that. Thank you. And kind of bringing this all together. And what I truly believe that when we talk about radical change, we talk about having those tough conversations, right? And part of that tough conversation is to really digest your own self. And something that my mentor, and I believe he's on the call, Rabbi Shmuley Yanklowitz, always talks to me about is how we are afraid of we put away the bad, right? We don't want to see it, which is why our prison systems are in the middle of nowhere. Our slaughterhouses are in the middle of nowhere. And it's also why we are also trying to refuse to look at people, right? And that's one of my own implicit biases is where that I had to deconstruct personally is looking at people in the eyes, looking at our unsheltered folks in the eyes. And now my next question is kind of hard, but how did you teach or preach deconstruction of implicit biases that most folks have towards the unsheltered community? How did you break that down either within yourself and then within your own volunteer system?
Well, I'll start with that because I did have a number of, and I still have a number of people who come out, they see it as volunteer work. And again, we have everything from Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts up to retirees. And some people have come out and they didn't feel comfortable. I've had one person that I used to do stuff with who made some comment like, oh, I've heard that homeless people don't get touched, so I make sure that I go up and touch people. And I was like, well, first of all, that's not consent. And this is not a petting zoo. Another person, so part of this is sort of educating people. I hate to say this, meeting them where they are, but going where they are and saying, we're not going to do this. You're not going to go back and post without me addressing it, saying, oh, if you want to feel better about what you're doing, go down there and spend 2 hours. That is not the spirit of why we go down there. And so, if anybody comes with that attitude of, oh, now I can go back and feel grateful about it, that's not the spirit. But again, I can't see people's hearts. What I do know is that, if for example, we have, now we have credit-bearing internships. We have volunteers who come down. So there's a way in which this is being integrated into the education process for the students. But even the language, and I like the fact that you talked about the unsheltered versus homelessness. That whole notion of home is really interesting to me. because home is not just a place. It's not just a place that shelters you. It's that whole support network that people don't have. And some of us have it and some don't. And so there's a way in which this continually evolves. We don't take pictures, for example, of our clients. At one point we were like, oh, we want to take this as a great moment, you know, and we're like, no, we only take pictures of our volunteers. So no camera. So that has been about evolution and offering some dignity when we're supposed to be down there trying to look at respect and compassion. But ultimately, I like that self-reflection part. Continually recognizing that we can learn at the same time that we're trying to guide and instruct. And when we've got, you know, people from Desert Vista, you know, people from the LDS Church, people from fraternity and sororities coming down, retirees coming down, people from community colleges coming down, it means for me that people want to do some good work. And that has been the ultimate response to this, is how can we do something that is bigger than we are? And people are itching to get back out, and they've got all this energy saved up. So we're trying to create these strategies so that they don't just give up and forget that we've got this work to do.
For me, it's like, Dr. Lester, thank you so much for talking about gratitude, because that's a really big part of helping people to understand what's happening. That you have gratitude for what you do have, no matter if it's, you know, a lot or a little. And I think modeling language is really important. You know, talking about the sheltered homeless versus the unsheltered homeless, talking about people experiencing homelessness, because then they move from experiencing homelessness to not experiencing homelessness.
Right.
And I also think it's a matter of truly digging deep in yourself and remembering maybe what it was like when you were a little kid and you didn't have the same clothes as somebody else, and maybe you coveted that other person's clothes, but then you realize, I have clothes and this other kid is coming to school in the same thing every single day. So teaching that empathy and that gratitude and modeling the language is really important. I think that I'm a firm believer in tours, and maybe people don't like that, or they don't like that word, but I believe that bringing people either in a car or taking a walk down to the Human Services campus is a real eye-opener for them. And it's not treating people who live there as somebody, you know, like who's on display, but it's really helping the person who's on the walk with you to see what happens every day in the life of someone experiencing homelessness. And I also think that being adopted by organizations like Arizona Jews for Justice, or, you know, ASU, Project Humanities, or even faith communities, that's super important, because I think that as knowledge grows, so does the capacity for people to feel that empathy.
I really like what you both said about empathy, because for me personally, you know, going out there is just a practice in empathy, and it's a practice in being open to, you know, being a more empathetic person myself. So I think that's the most important part for me personally.
Well, I also think that, you know, coming up with strategies where people can do other things instead of just doing one thing. Jackie Rifkin, who I keep referring to on the line, has been doing this and educating me, because she volunteers there all the time and is continually posting like, okay, here's some new data. You know, some of the stuff that you're getting is not exactly true. But we've also partnered with the human resources when the city was sort of running us out of the space. We were on the street literally, so we were really at the mercy of the elements. We still are. And so sometimes people get surprised by that, because they're looking for an address and they think we're going to be inside, and we're not. And part of that is because we want to meet people where they are. You know, they've tried to shift us to another space and we didn't go there. And then they started putting up signs saying, well, you know, you're going to be, you know, ticketed, and we have 20 people trying to move their cars. I was like, well, that's more disruptive than letting us finish for the 20 minutes. But I guess what gives me hope in this as we evolve is, one of our community partners that have been with us for the 5 years, transporting our donations from a site near ASU to the downtown campus, had to phase out of the service. But as soon as that happened, I reached out to some people at ASU, and the next thing I know is U-Haul had gifted us a truck. So we can continue that work. And that's what I keep saying is there's something that is choreographed that means that this work is supposed to happen. And couldn't have done that on my own. So it reminds me each time we go down that whatever successes have to be talked about in this, it is totally because we are collaborative. There is no success without collaboration. So we are poised and ready, and already taken that truck out to Peoria and picked up 300 pairs of sneakers that we have sized and gendered roughly, so that we are ready to hand those out as soon as it is safe. We've got boxes of socks that I'm going to be giving to Austin next week now that he's better, because of our partnership with Bombas Socks. And that's the stuff that feels like we are still trying to keep this moving. And at some point, we have to believe that we're going to be able to pick up where we left off. But to know that things haven't just stopped is encouraging for us. So these conversations are good. They encourage me. When there's so many other things I see around that do just the opposite. So I think those little bits of things that give us an extra push to go on, I think is precisely what we're trying to do with our students and with our communities, sort of interacting together.
Definitely. I mean, the collaboration that you're talking about is the biggest thing that inspires me personally, because, everything that we're doing, it's just a big community project. There are so many people involved. There are so many volunteers all across the state, and, people donate what they can. And there are so many people who message me and they're like, hey, I have this. Hey, I have this. And it's just such a big community project. And that's what I love about it. It's everyone is doing what they can, and it's really beautiful.
And the fact that it's not seasonal, and I'm not, seasonal is good, but it's sort of like waiting until, a birthday to tell somebody that you love them. I know that we get sort of preoccupied and we can't have these things happen all the time, but I think those little reminders that this is not something, when I say we're there from 6:30 a.m. to 8:30 and people say, oh, but that's so early. And I remind them that, you can go back to bed, and hunger and the support don't necessarily operate on a clock. So a little bit of guilt, but also if you can't do that, why don't you do a toothpaste drive? Or why don't you ask your local dentist for some floss and some toothpaste that we can give out? So there are all kinds of ways. There is nothing about this that no one can participate. But the biggest part has been dispelling those myths from people that are in our circles, and they say, oh, I've got a nice suit, but what would somebody experiencing homelessness do with a suit? Those are the most distressing conversations for me to have. And it takes me to a place that doesn't make me very comfortable, because I sort of respond in a kind of knee-jerk way and then have to self-reflect on that to say, well, people get jobs. Sometimes you may just want to walk around in a nice suit. So when I give somebody a gift, I hope it doesn't come with some sort of caveat that I have to do what you expect me to do with it. If it's a gift, you give that gift freely. And that's what I hope is taken away from the work that we're doing, is if somebody is handing money or whatever you give, let's not stand there and say, I'm going to watch to see what you're going to do with it now. Let's trust people, and let's offer them some respect and integrity and dignity.
Thank you so much. And that really ties into what I was thinking of the next question that I had jotted down, which is, we hear all these stories, right? We hear all these stories, and it's inevitable to bring that home with you, to bring everything that you experience and the pain. And I've personally have had Austin in tears when he calls me to check in and say, Eddie, I'm done. And he's like in tears telling me about what he witnessed. How do y'all cope with what you have witnessed? Because there is a graphic humanity that I think that it's a very crude thing where you experience what really a horrendous situation is like, right? When you see the dehumanization personally, how do you deal with that yourself without like really letting it just completely tear you down?
Well, I used to use the half-hour drive home to talk to myself. And basically, I would just get in the car, and I would work pretty late. So there were times that when I was at Justice Center, which, by the way, is a day resource center for homeless seniors, I would be there from 6:30 in the morning until 6:30, 7 o'clock at night, till I got a phone call from my husband that said, you better leave the building before it gets dark. So then I'd get in my car, and the whole ride home, I would talk to myself. And I'd talk about what breakthroughs we might have made that day. And I talk about the 20 people who we got on a housing list for that month. And it was really just a lot of positive, more, positive talk and sort of self-analysis. And then, when you work for a nonprofit, your evenings are pretty much taken that you kind of maybe you get to go home and then you go someplace else at night because you're going to give a speech. And so the evenings are very much, kind of set aside to do further education. And so really what you have to do is carve out one day where you are not doing it. You have to have your Sabbath. And whether it's your Sabbath on Monday or whether it's on Saturday or Sunday, or whether you celebrate it with, your little children or your grandchildren or by yourself, you have to make that Sabbath sacred to you so that you can rejuvenate yourself.
I think for me, I've been, I think I actually don't leave those moments feeling down. What I'm mostly appreciative of is when we've done our 2 hour, and it's like, it's very, I think, it's a smooth operation. We set up at 6:30, there are tables, there are, stations. We start taking it down at about 8. People have been the personal shoppers. And what I mostly leave are those wonderful stories that we sort of use as a group debrief. That's what I leave there with. And one of the stories I always tell is about Marco, who has a bike, and he always shows up, 10 minutes before we're supposed to close shop. I'm like, okay, we have to go. And Marco has to show me a crucifix that he's made from these found objects. And it's wire, and it's glass, and it's all, stones and all this. And he wants to sort of show them to people. And people sort of want to purchase them from him, but he's not out there sort of, like a salesperson. He's just saying, look at what I do. But one of the stories that stays with me is, he offered one of these crucifixes to me to use as a fundraiser for our project because he so appreciates, and he gives me the inside scoop and saying, y'all are doing good work. So don't let them scare you from doing this because people appreciate that. That's the stuff that I remember. What often bothers me is when I miss Miley, for example. And Miley was one of the persons who, was always wanting the 6-inch stilettos. And I remember just sort of stripped out of her clothes once and did kind of a runway thing for us. And people accepted that. And outside, I kept saying how unaccepted that would be for folks. And then about 3 weeks later, Miley came and was beaten and bruised up. And so those are the stories that stick with me because I really want to know how Miley's doing, and trying to give, people a name, and having someone at another setting come up to me, and I didn't recognize them, but they recognized me and said, you're that guy that comes out and helps us sometimes. I was like, well, I'm certainly one. They go, no, you're that guy. And I'm like, okay, that's gratifying to me when it doesn't come about me, but about the stories that they've told me. Because trust me, I have the privilege of walking out of that space. But what I can't walk out of is the experiences that they have given me during the time we've been there, and other people, as I said about bras, when family members said, stop telling that story. But it really is an important story. There's a person who wanted a certain size bra that's not a very common size, and we happen to have it. And this person came up and we gave the person 2, and the person cried. And we kept saying, this seems so small. in that same breath, we had to, remind people that we, if there's a women's line and a men's line, we don't tell people which line to get in or where they can shop. So there was one volunteer who says, well, and I was like, well, that's not where we are with this. They can get 6 items and they can do whatever they want to with it. So that's the part that I walk away, because it really is about education and about accepting people for who they are. And that to me is not something that you learn by reading in a book in a classroom. So that's what I leave with. So it's what are we going to do, and how are we going to get more volunteers, and is the weather going to cooperate with us? That's the stuff that keeps me up at night. How can we be more humane, and how can we deliver more, and how can we get more people out to support these individuals?
Wow, what a powerful message. Thank you so much. And I'm reading here, Jackie said, just the center is wonderful. Andre House is now using volunteers again. And Neal learned all about women's lingerie. And it's funny, we share a similar story about that.
Right.
My friend who's on here, Morgan, gave me a big bag full of bras and lingerie.
Yes.
We've been able to pass out as well, because when we were helping out asylum seekers, we had no idea. And
we have a whole underwear section now. That's what I'm saying. We have a mirror, and we have sunglasses, and we have reading glasses, and there are all these ways that we really try to set this up like a store, and we really are the personal shoppers. We are really the personal shoppers. And somebody came and said, wow, I thought you had to be rich to have a personal shopper. And I'm like, nope, we are here. Tell us. You get a ticket, you come in, because that helps us count the number of people, because we do like to serve. And we also, when people are standing in those lines to come in, then we, to the extent that they want to, we find out, well, how long have you been in the circumstances? What are your most immediate needs? What is there something that we may be able to connect you with another organization? So I have gone out shopping for Miley and then brought it back and was very distressed when I didn't see Miley again. So that's the kind of stuff that we're trying to offer in these. And I can tell you, if the times that I've had to miss it have been really, really hard for me. And while I have an excellent team of people carry on so it doesn't become about me, this had become really a lifestyle, and everything around my life was sort of like, okay, well, I have to do this on Friday afternoon, and I have to do this on this Saturday morning, so anything else I can do is fine, but this has to be, it's sort of like dieting, it has to be a lifestyle. This has become a lifestyle, and I can't wait to get back to it in the way that we were doing it.
Thank you. And just before we move on to our Q&A section of this, what is a message that you would give to anybody experiencing homelessness and is unfortunately in the unsheltered, part of the unsheltered community?
Mm-hmm. You mean directly to those individuals?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, goodness. I don't know that I could give any advice to folks. If I'm hearing your question, what I would do is say,
what message would you give?
Yeah, the message is that we care, and we are here to remind you that you are valued and you have worth. And you don't need us to tell you that, but that's what this means to us. And while we may not know your story, what we do know is that you have one, and it is worth our 2 hours or how much time we spend down there. And when Marco can come and give us that crucifix and ask us to do this, that's a certain kind of humanity that people who have way more have not offered to do that. So to me, it's about reminding ourselves of those connections that we can often get lost in by not acknowledging people's circumstances are different than ours.
Well, it's what I would say to anyone at a time of need, which is, you matter, and I care about you, and how can I help you right now? Because when you're in the situation of experiencing homelessness, there's so many subsets of uncertainty. Sometimes they can name it, and sometimes they can't. And so just asking, how can I help you right now?
Right.
Really helps people to lose their agitation and lose, whatever fright they might have, and focus and figure something out right now, what they need. And then you do what you can to help them, you know, get what they need right at that moment.
I think it's really great that what you're saying. You know, a lot of what I try to do personally is I think it's really important to listen and to try to spread that message of hope that you're talking about. You know, you are valued, you are important, and we want to listen to what you have to say.
You know, let me add this also. When people are, you know, there are two stations there. There's another church that's there, which is how I started this as part of a men's group. And as people were coming and getting those things that are easily, you know, transportable, somebody said, "Oh, do you have some socks?" And I heard that and knew that that was my cue. And then we set up this clothing corner that has now become this little market. But what I recognize is that in doing this, there were folks who were sort of suspicious of us going down because they were afraid. And so what I've learned from that experience is that coming down there and doing this work reminds me that these individuals have as much to give me as I think we're giving them. And sometimes there is rarely a conversation about their circumstance. It is about the life they had before this happened to them, or it's about a family member, or it's about, I need a phone to call my brother. Nobody has asked us for money. Nobody has asked us for, you know, a bus ticket. What I also know is that when people are in line, I will remind them to pick up after themselves, that we are not going to be treated like children. If you see trash on there, pick it up. You're also welcome to help us when we are cleaning up, because that is one of the reasons they don't want us down. So I don't want to talk down to people, but I also want to remind them that in this circumstance, unless there's something that's preventing you from doing it, we have put a bag over here and a box over here. Please put your cup in that. So there's a certain kind of way that I found that they respect that, and they get after other people if they're not picking up after themselves. So that has to be part of this too. So this is not about coddling people. This is about respecting people, but also letting them know that we deserve respect too. So just because we're down there doesn't mean you can just throw things down and expect us to walk around and pick them up. You can help do this too.
Thank you so much. So we have just enough time for one or two questions from our peeps on here. Go ahead and type it either in your chat box, or go ahead and just unmute yourself. I went ahead and let everybody unmute themselves if they want to go ahead and ask a question.
Well, I have a question actually for Austin, because I don't really get to talk to him that much.
Hey, Barbara.
Busy. Hey, Austin. So, Austin, how can we help you in what you want to do and how you may want to expand what you do? What are some of the things that we can do to help you? Because you're out there on the street every week, and I don't necessarily, I do some of that, but not as often as you. So how can we help you, and what are some of the plans you have for expanding your program within Arizona Jews for Justice?
For sure, yeah. Well, I think one really big thing is just whatever you have around the house, whatever you can give, you know, whatever you think that someone experiencing homelessness could need, just let me know and I'll come pick it up. That's been one thing that when I'm just talking to people, it's just that's kind of the biggest thing that I've been trying to tell people is, you know, if you have a case of water, like that could help 24 people, you know. So I don't know, but yeah, going forward, I really want to start, you know, maybe a day resource center, or set up some more sustainable ways of helping these people. So it's just, I would love to grow the project in that way. But another thing that I've been thinking about is, you know, finding a way to contact the community when we need really direct acts of service. Like for Ellie, for example, the woman who got run over by a car. I'm not a medical professional, you know, so I can only do so much in that aspect. But, you know, finding, you know, asking people who are trained, you know, what medicine can we get? What does she need? And just kind of collaborating with more people.
Thank you so much. So it looks like we unfortunately ran out of time. Stu says, I'm going to read this really quickly and answer. Is there more information about the concept of Amazon wish list that Dr. Lester mentioned? And does AJJ have a similar concept? I think that's something we can definitely construct and and bring on board. We had a similar thing when we were having our asylum seekers out. And I loved everything that we discussed today. And part of what we get at Arizona Juice for Justice as part of our hygienic kits and our donation kits are things that we would think, what would we want? What would we want to make us feel like a human being, right? And part of that reminds me of when my mother was inside of a detention center. The first thing that she wanted when she came out was a comb, a simple comb. And that's what made her feel like a human being. And that's where we construct our packets and how much love we put into them. And we also put in personalized notes for folks to be able to read, to remind them of the humanity of who they are. I want to give a huge thank you to our 3 amazing, wonderful speakers for really diving into an amazing discussion today and the perfect dialogue, especially for our Jewish community who's getting ready to go into high holidays and celebrate a new year. This is a perfect concept to help inside. How are you helping out folks, and how are you bringing back dignity to the people who are the most oppressed and the most vulnerable? Reminder to everybody, we have a donation drive coming up this Sunday the 13th from 1 to 3. It's a drive-through donation drive, a COVID drive-through donation drive where everybody will have masks. If you bring a donation, Juice for Justice is happy to provide you with a handmade mask as well that you can reuse and have at your expense. Once more, again, I cannot say how much I appreciate Dr. Lester, how much I appreciate my great friend Austin, and my great mentor Barbara Lewkowitz for joining us on the call today. If you have friends who missed this event, don't worry about it. We will record it and we will be able to post it, which you can share with everybody. Don't forget to like, share, and comment on our Facebook page. Have a great night, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for hosting. Good night.
Thank you all for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.